Hello and welcome. I have so many measurements for us to get through. I have 3 columns that go all the way from the top to the bottom of my sheet here. You ready to get started? Excellent. So we're going to start with the face. And just to get it out of the way, I want to get a couple of circumferences. So I think that'll be enough. And I'm just going to put this right here. There we go. And then just wrap that around and let's see how big your head is. Okay, so I'm just going to unlock the tape and gently pull it away. It can get a little mischievous when it's unfurled so much. And then let's just go with a bit of a shorter length, and we're going to get around the neck. Now, I'm not going to go very tightly, it's just going to be a very loose fit, okay? So, let's come right here, and then just like that. See, not very tight at all. There we are. Okay. Those were going to be 2 of our most wily measurements. So we just want to get those out of the way. And so we have our head circumference as well as the neck. And then we can start doing some just flat measurements. So, do you know what kind of model here that you've been asked to get your measurements done for? Maybe muscles, bones, so hairline to the chin here, okay. Good. Yeah, you just kind of show up and do what they need you to do, sure. And hairline to the lips here. Good. And to the nose right here. Okay, and then to the eyes. There we are. So I'll just be taking a few measurements generally and then jotting them down. There. We want to try to be rather precise here, since we are making a medical model out of you. We are going to be doing some different lengths now. So we'll do the forehead, the nose, mouth, and chin here. And then we'll work on some widths. So I might need, let's go ahead and get this ready. So I like to do thinner or smaller measurements with this set of calipers here. Makes it a little quicker, a little less awkward. So, forehead, there we are. Forehead. So I think for all these I'm not going to need more than 6 inches here, since we are just doing some features isolated on their own. So we've got right there. Okay. And then to the nose. Good. And then we'll use the calipers for the mouth, just so we make sure that it is precise. And we are doing this in imperial measurements just because it's more comfortable for me to just go back and calculate the centimeter value rather than work in metric. Not too bad in metric temperature wise, because I use that fairly often with my best friend who lives in Germany. There we are. Okay, just stay still. And then we'll just match this up here. I'm going to take it from the 1 inch line there. Oh, just over half. Good. That's going to be okay. 9/16. 9/16 there. So later I can go back and just put everything in metric as well as put everything in decimal values rather than fractions. Okay, so for the chin here, we start below the lip. Go right about here. Okay, good. Do let me know if at any point you need a little break, or if you're touched out for a second. This can be a little involved, a little touchy. So we have quite a few measurements with the face, but we're going to switch for a moment to some widths. And then we are going to be doing some lengths and widths. Okay, so we want the width at the middle of the face, so that's from the tragus to the tragus here. Gonna need a little more slack, I think. Okay. There. Is that okay? Right there. Okay. Good. have anything super fun planned for the rest of your week? Just gonna go temple to temple, yeah. I see. Well, I think it's really in that sort of transitional state where really if you have any fun plans, then you can certainly make them work and enjoy the spring as best as you can, but it's still just chilly enough that if you really just wanted to hang out at home, just going to do draw here, then no one would blame you either. Lots of flexibility. Okay, I'm just going to put that right there. Okay. And it wants to be a little slippy. We're going to get that. There we are. Okay, that's all I need. Some people's chins don't want to hold on to the tape and it wants to go under. Okay, so you have a very standard proportioned face here. It's even here at the temples and jaw, wider here at the middle, which I see that quite frequently. And then we're going to do from the edge of the ear here to the other edge. And this shouldn't be so slippy. Okay, so we're going to rest this along your nose here. There we are. Okay, and just center that. There we are. And then after that, we're going to change it up a little bit. So now we are going to do some heights, but I'm going to need that caliper, I believe. So let's go ahead and do, let's start with the eyebrows. So I'm not going to need, that would be quite an eyebrow if it was quite thickened like that. Not that I don't see that. It's just not generally common, so let's just check. Let's check right here. Little thinner. Actually, while I'm doing this, just to make this quick, I'm going to just set that at 4 inches. I think that'll be enough, and then we can just pop that down. Okay, so I was tightening this up. Okay. There we are. Good. I have a bit of an odd project myself that I've been trying to work on weekends and just whenever I have a bit of free time, which generally is not very often. So we have our heights here. That was on the right side, left side. Okay, and then is the top of the arch the same here? It's a little thinner. Just a little bit. So, a little bit of a weird project myself, where upon myself, since I have a few nibblings and one sibling who doesn't really know a lot about our background. Okay, so that arch there was just the littlest bit. So we had, that's 7/16 each there. And unfortunately, there weren't really any stories or traditions passed down, not from any part of my family. Just want to look at the tail of your eyebrows. Yeah, no, that's too much. There we are. So I'm finding that I'm looking for folklore, stories, mythology, that sort of thing, for my nibblings if they're interested. More of my siblings are kind of thinking in the future about if they are having children or not. So I wanted that to just basically be ready to go if that was something they were interested in. Okay, let's just jot that down. Because, you know, a lot of times growing up, the sort of stereotype, I suppose, we're going to do the eyes now. I'm going to open this up. Is that, you know, you read to children before they go to bed. And often it's things that, you know, are old stories. Jack and the Beanstalk and the little fairy tale books, Hans Christian Andersen tales. I don't know about her, but no, I need a little bit bigger. You don't have real small eyes there. But in my household, that wasn't something that happened. So for my siblings, I took it upon myself to do that for them. And they loved it when I read to them. I always wanted to have little sleepovers. I was the sibling that had the only downstairs bedroom and everybody else was upstairs. So in the summertime, we would have the air on only upstairs. So sometimes I would sleep up there with everybody. And that's when I would read stories. I liked, there was one in particular called The Pokey Little Puppy. They liked that one, and I would make up stories for them. Okay, and then mouth got the chin, okay. So let's go ahead and go to the ear. I think I can just use this. So I would have them make up characters and tell them to come up with, you know, the kind of story that they wanted or plot points or things like that. So let's still here, just doing the ears. And then I would make up a story for them. They could come up with character names, things like that. And nobody did that for me. So I wanted something to pass down to my nibblings, future and existing. There we go. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to go to some widths here. And one of the things I was really interested in was stories in particular from our familial background. So, my great-grandfather came to the U.S. He was 18 or 19 from Croatia. And so my background is Slavic, more specifically South Slav. So Slavic means that it's part of a group of people that speak Slavic languages, like Romance languages, Germanic. And South Slavs, let's see, I think I could do this, but let me see if the calipers will open up enough that maybe we can do it with this. I just want to be real delicate about the eyes. So you have East, West, and South Slavs. Oh yeah, that'll do it. Oh, I even went a little overboard. So your East Slavs, that's people like Russians or people from Ukraine. Your West Slavs, that's from countries like Czechoslovakia or Poland. Your South Slavs, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria. Oh, I just really overshot that, didn't I? And a lot of stories and mythology, yeah, we're just going to tweak that a bit, come from East and West Slavs. So, for example, I know the Witcher series of media in general, a lot of that is based on Slavic folklore and mythology. And then you have Shadow and Bone, which is called the Grishaverse. And that is based on Slavic, I think it's more like Russian folklore. And you have things like the vampire, which I believe came from Serbia, or at least, you know, that kind of specific word did. Okay, let's... Oh, I just totally forgot what I had measured. Too busy chatting. Okay, that's what I thought. Good. Okay, and then the ears, which I can do that without the calipers. Okay. So we'll just do... But then you have things like Baba Yaga, for example, which I believe comes from more the Russia area. But stories, mythology, that sort of thing, specifically from South Slavs, is a bit of a Swiss cheese history. From what I read, it's because South Slavs settled the area and then rather shortly thereafter were Christianized, and their beliefs and their stories were not written down. So now we're going to move to the neck. We've already done a round, so we don't need to do that, but we can do the length and width. So, trying to find South Slav folklore and mythology that's written in English is rather difficult. And like I said, nothing was passed down from my family. The only thing that my biological father had shared, not passed down, were Croatian dumplings and krošulje, which is a sweet fried pastry dough dessert. What I mean by shared is they weren't explicitly passed down. We weren't given recipes or anything, but luckily, at least for krošulje, it's a very simple recipe, so we didn't need the specific family recipe. But yeah, nothing else, no stories, no nothing. So I went on a little deep dive myself. Let's get, I don't know that I'll need calipers anymore, but let's go ahead and make sure that we've got those measurements down before I go ahead and close these up. So one thing I found kind of interesting about the Croatian language as I was researching, it's fairly straightforward. The words are said as they're written, except for a few caveats with pronunciation of certain letters. It is luckily written in Latin script, so I didn't have to learn Cyrillic like a lot of other Slavic languages. Okay, so now we're going to do some chin measurements, clavicle and sternum. So, for example, the C letter in Croatian is pronounced as a TS sound, and the R is generally rolled, although I've come across native speakers who do not roll the R's. And the V is weird. Just the sternum. Okay. So, something I saw quite frequently when you're looking at videos of people teaching the Croatian language is that, and then we have right there, is that sometimes it would be people that have Croatian as their second, third, it's not their first language, and then you have a native speaker, and I would find in the comments a lot of people would say that the person who was a non-native speaker had better pronunciation than the native speaker. And I would find that often enough with different people. And then I had read a little bit somewhere that sometimes pronunciation gets a little bit lazy. We're just doing the clavicles here. Okay, so there's our lengths. And I might have actually wanted the calipers here for the width, but we'll do the best we can. But the V has always tripped me up because, and maybe this is a dialect thing, I don't know. Okay, just a little half inch there. But take the word, I believe it's for thank you. It's spelled HVALA. And if you hear it said, sometimes you'll hear hvala, and sometimes you'll hear hwala. And I found that with a lot of other words as well. Like Plitvice, I believe, was one of the, I believe that's a lake. But a nice hard V sound. But sometimes it's a W. And I think it's supposed to be more of a W, but that is not standard. We're going to do the sternum now, from the manubrium to the xiphoid process here. So pronunciation can be a little tricky there. But what I found in terms of mythology and whatnot is quite interesting. So that's the length there, nice, just over 6 inches, and then the sternal body is going to be the widest here. Okay. So there are actually quite a few things that are in more the mainstream of what people think of in general as monsters and that sort of thing that you'll find from South Slav mythology. And it was really difficult to find that stuff. It got pretty niche there for a while. Now we're going to do the chest width and length here. So, for example, you have what's kind of like a fairy or a forest nymph called the vila. It's another V word. The vila, or plural vilae. Okay. And they're often quite similar to, let's say, Western European fairy folklore, except they have cloven hooves, but they can be benevolent. They can also be quite malevolent as well. Shoulder to shoulder. Okay, so outsides the shoulders here. And another figure that is connected to the vilae is something called a krsnik, which, when I had read about that, I immediately thought of Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher. Because a krsnik is basically like a vampire hunter, a monster hunter who studied under the vilae. And then, of course, you have the vampire, which the term, I believe, originates in Serbia. Most cultures have a creature that subsists on the blood of people, but Croatia has its own vampiric myths, and it's right there, right by Serbia as well. Okay, we're just doing the abdomen here, so I'm coming from under the rib cage to the top of the hips. Okay, and we're just going to do a width here, and then we'll grab a circumference. And then you have another thing that the krsnik hunts, and that is a voodkolak, which is quite similar to a werewolf, more like a shape-shifting wolf man. Okay, we're going to get a chest circumference and an abdominal circumference here. And then you get into some figures. I'm going to have you just, there you are. Okay, go ahead and keep your arms up. I'm going to have to go around you here. we'll do the chest first. So you have the ved, plural vedi, and then you have the div and the plural divovi. Okay, we're just going to lower this down and do the abdomen here. Okay. And these are both, they're both essentially giants, and again, they can be either malevolent or benevolent. Sometimes they're helpers, sometimes they capture people and take them away. Now we're just doing the hip circumference here. Okay. But that one I can't find a good amount of information on. Nothing really detailed, I suppose. Except just that they're hair-covered giants. And then you have the Babaroga, which, like I said earlier, there's a figure in Russian folklore and mythology called Baba Yaga. But the Babaroga is different in that, from what I gathered, okay, so we're doing the hips. So we're going to do the length hip to hip, and then I'm going to try to get the pelvic height. It's similar in that it is an old woman figure, the crone. Okay, and I'm just going to come right here. So this is the top of the ilium there, and then right in here. But I believe a Babaroga is kind of a house spirit. But when I would read Reddit posts, Croatian people would say that their parents would threaten that if they weren't good, then the Babaroga would take them away. Okay, now we're going to get to the arms here. We're going to do the upper arm. Okay. And the lower arm should be about the same. And then you have more the, not folklore, but mythology figures, the former pagan gods. So we have just on the upper arms. So you have Perun, which I think is like the king of the gods. It's like Odin. And, okay, we want to do some widths here. I'm just going to get the middle of the arm here where it's widest. And you have Veles. You have Triglav. Okay, and the lower arm. Crnobog, which is also known as the Black God. In Croatian, that's CRN, root, and then just depending on if it's a masculine or feminine or, you know, whatever gender the subject is, then you add a letter at the end. Crn, that means black. But again, this is after quite a few sources. I think I've got it's 13 or 14 tabs open currently. A lot of it tends to be Reddit posts because it'll be someone asking about South Slav mythology and what people grew up with. I'm just going to get the circumference here. And then you have little niche blogs that are dedicated to mythology in general, and then they might have a little bit on South Slav mythology, and maybe if you're even luckier, it might be on Croatian specifically. Okay, so I got some circumferences there. Okay, we are getting close to being done here. Okay, let's go ahead and let's do the hand here. So if I could see, I'm going to do lengths and widths. Okay, quite a bit longer hands than I do. Mine are very small. I have the smallest hands in my family, and my family loves to make fun of them. Call them baby hands. I can't even, hold a normal water bottle very well because they're just very small. And then my fingers are quite short as well. I don't know. That's the one place where things were just not very proportional. Okay, so we got some lengths and widths there. Must be nice to have bigger hands. Let's see, mine are they're only like 6 inches long. Okay, and then let's get our wrist circumference. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of get some stories. That hasn't been super fruitful. I mean, there's, tales about vampires, and there's like a version of Romeo and Juliet, which I don't really think that's a great story for small children. And then you have stories like The Curse of King Svanimir, where Croatia wasn't supposed to be ruled after him by anyone of Croatian blood for like 1,000 years or something like that. Okay, let's go ahead and get the thigh length here. I'm trying to find things that are, it's sharing a little bit of ancestral culture, but it's interesting enough for kids. Okay, let's do some widths here. Good. So it's just going to take me some time. That's why I've been spending quite a bit of time on that project, because you want to make sure that there's a variety of stories and that they're going to be interesting enough to actually pass on. And I don't know that I'd ever want to traumatize my nibblings with a Barbaroka story. Okay, and then lower leg widths here. This is going to be at the calf. That's going to be our meatiest part. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at your feet here. feet are pretty standard as well. Yes, well, my hands are very small. My feet are just average. So that's a real strange thing. Okay, and the width here. Right, there we are. So yes, South Slav, mythology and folklore. Okay, let's get a few circumferences here, and then we'll have to do a couple of gross measurements. Okay, thigh. Lower leg. Luckily, these are all just the same here. Okay, and I'm gonna need you to put your foot up here so I can get the ankle. Okay, and the other one. Good. But funnily enough, it's still easier to try to find mythology and folklore and whatnot than it is to find recipes. Because where my family is from, they ate things like octopus, and a lot of Croatia likes to eat kind of the like the junk fish, the bottom feeders. Watched a Anthony Bourdain episode, and you know, they make the most of what they have, and they make it delicious. But we don't have octopus here in the landlocked Midwest. Okay, I'm gonna use a big tape here, and we're gonna put this right by your feet here, and we're gonna go your head here. Okay, chin, sternum. Okay. So yeah, it's mostly, Croatia is a very eclectic cuisine. They influenced by the Ottomans, the Venetians, Italy in general. And they were Austria-Hungary for a long time, so a lot of Hungarian influence. Things with paprika. They have incredible wine. I can't wait to take my partner someday to see where my family's from. Because not only is it just so beautiful, but Croatia has some incredible wine. It's got an excellent climate for it. And I hear the cheese is excellent as well. Okay. Good. So, can't wait to go someday. Now, okay, we have quite a few measurements here, and I just want to run down, so any fractions and things of that sort I will convert later. You don't have to stay for that, because that'll take me a bit. And I'll convert to decimal as well as metric. And that looks excellent. So I think that's all I need from you. just as a little parting thing. Another thing I had learned in Croatia, or about Croatia, is a couple of terms of endearment. So you have SRCE, srca, and that means heart, like sweetheart. And then you have draga, which is the masculine form, and dragi, which is the feminine form of dear, like darling. So that's all I need from you, srca. Now let me go ahead and just sign off. And that'll be it. Thank you so much for coming in. I hope you have a whale of a day.